The black cab pulled up to the curb outside Eden's Balmoral Hotel at exactly 3:47 p.m. on a rain-soaked Tuesday afternoon, its diesel engine idling with the particular rhythm that only London taxis seem to possess. Sean Connery, at 78, had specifically requested this vintage cab for his journey to Glasgow, not because he couldn't afford more luxurious transportation, but because he had always found something comforting about the unpretentious reliability of traditional British taxi service. "You're Mr. Connery, then?" asked the driver as Sean settled into the spacious rear compartment. The voice carried the unmistakable accent of Glasgow's working-class neighborhoods, seasoned with decades of cigarettes and honest labor. "I am indeed, and you're taking me home to Glasgow, I believe." "Ah, that's right, 2-hour drive in this weather. I'm Danny McBride, by the way. Been driving this route for 38 years, never had a celebrity passenger before." John studied the back of Danny's head in the rearview mirror, gray hair beneath a worn, flat cap, weathered hands gripping the steering wheel with practiced confidence, shoulders that spoke of a man who had spent his life in service to others. 38 years is quite a career. You must have some stories." "View here and there," Danny replied as they pulled into Edinburgh's afternoon traffic. "Though I imagine yours are more interesting than mine." "I wouldn't be so sure about that. What made you choose taxi driver?" Danny was quiet for several minutes as he navigated through the city center, windshield wipers fighting against the persistent Scottish rain. "Wasn't much choice involved, if I'm honest," Danny said finally. "Lost my job at the shipyard in 1986 when they closed down. Had 3 kids and a mortgage. Needed work that would let me support my family. Taxi driving was steady, decent money if you were willing to work long hours. Must have been a difficult transition." "Aye, it was. Went from building ships, something permanent, something that mattered, to driving strangers around the city. Felt like a step down, to be honest." John found himself genuinely interested in Danny's story. "But you've been doing it for nearly 4 decades. It must have grown on you." It did, but not in the way I expected." As they left Edinburgh behind and headed west toward Glasgow, Danny seemed to relax into conversation, perhaps sensing that his passenger was genuinely interested rather than just making polite small talk. "See, when I started driving, I thought the job was just about getting people from point A to point B," Danny continued. "Pick up a fare, deliver them safely, collect the money, move on to the next one. But it became something more, or much more. Took me about 6 months to realize I wasn't really in the transportation business. I was in the human business." John leaned forward slightly, intrigued. "How do you mean?" "Well, think about it. People get into my cab during some of the most important moments of their lives. I've driven women to hospital to give birth, taken men to job interviews that would change their families' futures, carried people to funerals, weddings, first dates, last conversations with dying relatives." Danny's voice grew more animated as he spoke, clearly passionate about something he had spent decades thinking about. "And here's the thing, they're usually nervous, excited, scared, hopeful, all at once. They're not just going somewhere, they're traveling toward their futures. And for those 20, 30 minutes in my cab, I get to be part of that journey." Sean felt something profound in Danny's words. "That's a beautiful way to see it. It took me years to understand it properly. I used to think the shipyard work was more important because we were building something physical, something that would last. But this work, helping people reach the moments that matter to them, that lasts too, just in a different way." "John, can you give me an example?" Danny chuckled. "Hundreds of them, but there's one I'll never forget. About 15 years ago, I picked up an old man from a nursing home. He was maybe 85, hadn't been out of that place in 2 years. His granddaughter had arranged for him to visit his wife's grave on their wedding anniversary." "That sounds meaningful." "Hey, but here's the thing. When we got to the cemetery, he couldn't walk the distance to her headstone. So I helped him out of the cab, let him lean on my arm, walked with him through the wet grass, stood there while he talked to her for 20 minutes, told her about their children, their grandchildren, how much he missed her cooking." Danny paused, clearly moved by the memory even after all these years. "When we were walking back, he thanked me, not just for the ride, but for helping him keep his promise to visit her every year. He said he'd been afraid he'd have to break that promise because he couldn't manage it alone." Sean felt touched by this simple story of human kindness. "Did you see him again?" "Every month for the next 3 years until he passed. Same route, same cemetery, same quiet conversation with his wife. And each time I'd walk with him, help him keep that promise. That's remarkable, Danny. Is he? I think it's just the job done properly. People trust you with their important moments. You have a responsibility to treat those moments with respect. As they drove through the Scottish countryside, Sean found himself thinking about his own career, about the moments when people had trusted him with their stories, their emotions, their entertainment. Danny, may I ask you something personal? Of course you can. You ever regret leaving the shipyard? You miss building something you could point to and say, I made that? Danny considered this question seriously, slowing slightly as they approached a curve in the wet road. I used to think that way, he said finally. Used to think that unless you were building bridges or ships or buildings, your work didn't really matter. But I've learned something over the years. Was that every person I've helped reach an important destination, every woman I got into the hospital safely, every man I've delivered to a job interview on time, every child I've taken to visit a grandparent, they all went on to live their lives, make their contributions, build their own things. Maybe I wasn't building ships anymore, but I was helping other people build their futures. Sean felt genuinely moved by this philosophy. You're saying that enabling others' important moments is itself important work. Exactly. My daughter, she's a teacher now. Couldn't have finished university if I hadn't been working steady hours, making decent money. My son runs his own construction company, started with loans I could co-sign because I had reliable income. My youngest, she's a nurse at Children's Hospital in Glasgow. You must be very proud. I am. But more than that, I understand now that every fare I've drove, every person I helped get where they needed to go, that was all part of building something bigger, not a ship that would sail the seas, but a life that could support my family while serving my community. As they approached the outskirts of Glasgow, Sean realized that Danny had given him something unexpected, a new way of understanding the value of work, the meaning of service, the connection between helping individuals and serving society. Danny, Sean said as familiar Glasgow landmarks came into view, this has been one of the most enlightening conversations I've had in years. Has it? You're very kind to say so. Most passengers just want quiet or they're on their phones. Nice to have someone who actually wants to talk. Can I ask where you learned this perspective, this understanding about the value of your work? From the passengers mostly. You drive people during their important moments for 38 years, you start to understand what really matters. It's not the famous destinations or the expensive fares. It's being present when someone needs reliable help to get where they're going. As they pulled up to Sean's destination in Glasgow's West End, Danny turned in his seat to face his passenger directly. Mr. Connery, can I say something? Yeah, of course. I've watched your films over the years, and I always thought your success was about being larger than life, about being extraordinary. But talking with you today, you're just a decent man who listens well and treats people with respect. That's the real thing, isn't it? John felt profoundly moved by this observation. I think you've just taught me something important about that, Danny. Excellence isn't about being extraordinary. It's about doing ordinary things with extraordinary care and attention. Ah, yeah, that's it exactly. As Sean paid the fare, he included a generous tip and something extra, his personal card with a handwritten note. Hey, what's this then? Danny asked. It's my contact information. I have a feeling I'll want to make this journey again, and I'd prefer to travel with someone who understands that the quality of the trip matters more than the speed of arrival. Danny looked at the card with obvious emotion. You'd really want me to drive you again? Danny, in 2 hours, you've reminded me why I chose acting in the first place, not for fame or recognition, but for the opportunity to be present during important moments in people's lives, to help them feel something meaningful. That's very kind of you to say. It's very true. You've shown me that every form of service, whether it's acting, taxi driving, or any other honest work, has dignity when it's done with genuine care for the people you serve. 6 months later, Danny would receive a call asking if he could drive Sean to Edinburgh for a special event. When Danny arrived at the pickup location, he would find Sean waiting with a small wrapped package. Inside would be a signed photograph, but not of Sean as James Bond or any famous character. Instead, it would be a picture of Sean as himself with an inscription that read, "To Danny McBride, who taught me that the most important journeys are measured not in miles, but in moments of human connection. Thank you for showing me that true professionalism means treating every passenger's story as if it matters, because it does. Because it does." It wasn't just a taxi ride. It was the discovery that wisdom can be found in every honest conversation, that dignity exists in every form of genuine service, and that sometimes the most profound teachers are the ones who show up reliably day after day to help people reach the moments that matter most in their lives